Being a user of social media, as we know, means opening up to the ability of such sites to reveal your activities to both intended and often unintended audiences. In Chapter 3, James explains that 3 areas of thinking when discussing privacy for youth online are as follows: the self, known others, and the larger community. But she also notes that many youth tend to only think of privacy in relation to how it affects them personally, with little regard to how it affects others like their peers, never mind the larger community. This, according to James, suggests a blindness on the part of many teens and young adults to the ethical and moral implications of their actions online, which essentially blurs the boundaries of offline and online activity of youth. And this is seen on page 25. Even though all youth are aware of the notion that their offline actions were potentially public to unintended audiences, their typical response was the attempt to control their audiences rather than to reconsider their behavior online. I think this is the main point that she tries to argue throughout the chapter. This point seems very anti-UNCRC to me, but it doesn't mean that the chapter on a whole disagrees with what both the UNCRC and what Boyd have previously stated on privacy. Boyd has stated that privacy isn't something that youth actively try to achieve in spite of the social barriers which make it difficult for them to do so. But by having said this, they are aware of the risks and participate in online settings in purposeful ways. They exercise agency in addition to privacy in their online encounters. James then takes this and almost flips it on itself to prove that children and youth seem to only think mainly of themselves when making decisions online, stating that youth must realize that online privacy mishaps involve both the individual who made the regrettable decision online and the person who recorded and shared it with the wider audience are both at fault. It means realizing that one's online privacy cannot be fully achieved without working as a collective group with all youth that are surrounding them. Like Boyd, she recognizes that children do care about and recognize privacy, both online and offline, but they thought about it in largely conventional ways. However, her judgment is based on the notion that while it's great that young people care about privacy and acknowledge its importance, they need to start asking the extent to which they are alert to the moral and ethical issues of others in addition to those of themselves personally. She gives the example of Maeve on page 33, who, along with her friends, appear to have a social contract, which they built on the moral trust, on mutual trust, and their friendship, where they seek to protect one another's privacy online in addition to that of their own. She states that thinking about the notion of doing unto others as you would like to have done unto you, the golden rule type of thinking, one which was always taught to me in schools, one that I teach to my students, particularly those in Catholic schools. Using this mentality is a common way for youth in her studies to show moral sensitivity about one another's privacy. It's not so much the mentality that privacy is in your own hands per se, but rather the realization that something needs to be done to ensure that everyone is thinking about privacy in relation to not only themselves, but their peers and their classmates and those of the broader context around them. James concludes that one's thinking on privacy needs to take into account the social nature of the internet and our roles on it as sharers, searchers, and consumers, as she states on page 44. To sum up, page 45 has a quote that I think really stands to me, which reads, it's by Jeffrey Rosen. It says, "As all of us stumble over the challenges of living in a world without forgetting, we need to learn new forms of empathy, new ways of defining ourselves without reference to what others say about us, and new ways of forgiving one another for the digital trails that will follow us forever." I think this nicely encompasses James's views on youth and the outlook on privacy she thinks that youth should have, but seem to lack. This is a view that I think differs from Boyd and the UNCRC, as they see it a little differently.